Good morning. Most people did not know what to make of him. People would stare, point. Little kids were sometimes terrified of him, but it never bothered Mark. He had no idea. It didn't bother us either. My parents were incredible. They laughed off most of the most embarrassing moments and made the best of everything. I never heard them complain a day in our lives, and I could not have imagined thinking anything was strange about our situation. This is the story about my brother Mark. In the Happiness Lab podcast, Yale professor Laurie Santos tries to teach her listeners a whole set of tips for simple things you can do to be happier every day. The main premise of the Happiness Lab is this idea that our minds seem to lie to us about the kinds of things that make us happy. Episode 8 is called Help Others to Help Yourself. This brings me back to my brother Mark. My older brother, my only brother, Mark, was born severely mentally challenged. He was forever the age mentality of a 2-year-old. He grew in size, but was always young at heart, always a 2-year-old. There were many things he could not do. He could not talk, he could not tie his shoes, shower himself, wash his hair, cut his fingernails, or kill a fly. There were many more things he could do. He learned to swim, get dressed, feed himself, and buckle his seatbelt. He learned some really basic sign language from my sisters and me, and he could make us laugh. He was that kind of big, awkward, embarrassing person in your life that everyone stared at when you went to the store or to a baseball game or to church. For most of my life, I was clueless. He was 4 years older, and he was just my brother. I had no idea there was anything different about him. It was just who he was. Sure, I kind of knew he was different, but I never really thought about it. He was just Mark. My sister and I spent most of our time teaching Mark to do things, learning to sign different words, how to do things for himself. This was our life, watching over Mark so he didn't eat too much, drink too much, unroll all the toilet paper into the toilet and clog it up. We were obsessed with teaching him words and creating our own language so we understood him better. We took care of him all the time. It was everything in my childhood. That is not to say that my parents did nothing. Quite the contrary. They actually did everything and probably just let us do some things to make us feel included and special. It just seemed like we did it all. One strong memory I have is of taking Mark to football practice during middle school and high school. This was not a one-time affair. This felt like, and maybe it was actually every day. He loved sports. And we lived across the street from a college campus, and Mark became obsessed with the football team. The coach, Denny Golden, was a good family friend, and he made sure that all his players knew exactly who Mark was and that he was a very special human being. Mark would sit outside on a folding metal chair as the college players walked out of the locker room and went to practice in their uniforms. And they would all tap him on the head when they went by and say, "Hey, Mark," as they went off to practice. After all the players had walked the half mile to the field, Mark and I would trudge off behind them to watch practice. I would sit in the stands and try to pretend that I wasn't there and that this wasn't happening. And Mark would stay on the sidelines with the players. When the players took off their helmets for one reason or another, Mark would take the players' helmets and then line them up on the sidelines. When the coaches called a play, it was a mad scramble for each player to find their own helmet. New freshmen on the team would try and hold on to their helmets and not give it to Mark. They were probably a little nervous of my brother, or maybe afraid to lose their helmet in the helmet lineup. Either reason was totally understandable. But if the coaches saw this happening, they would grab that player by the jersey and yell at them to give their helmet to Mark, and then Mark would be off again lining up the helmets. When I was a teenage girl and this was happening, Like I said, I was mortified. I was a high school kid, and these were college boys. And I was with Mark. He was big and embarrassing at times. But looking back on it as an adult, I see it really differently. I realized that every day I was with Mark, I had to do something for somebody else. In those football practices alone, I took Mark to do the thing he loved most in the world, watch football. And I got to help my mom for maybe an hour during that day, quite possibly the only hour she didn't have to take care of Mark herself. Neuroscience tells us that giving is a powerful pathway for creating more personal joy. Possibly it was out of need, but my sisters and I were taught at an early age that we had to give of our time, love, and attention to Mark, and that brought us so much joy. Now, generally in my life, when I tell people that I had a brother who was mentally challenged, either they don't know what to say, or they say they're sorry, or some version of this. I try to reckon this with the fact that every expectant parent wishes for a healthy baby when their children are born. Mark was not what a parent would wish for. And yet, when I think about how much love and happiness I have felt in my life because of Mark, I cannot imagine wishing for another life or a different brother. A few years ago, my brother died. And at his funeral, at which I felt I should know everyone, random people I did not know kept coming into the funeral home to pay their respects. People who had worked with him at places like CVS, or others who had been teachers at a summer camp. Then there were the football players, coaches, captains, and players of the teams in those years that Mark watched all those practices. They came back to share their own memories of the helmets and of Mark sitting outside their locker room day after day. They were grown men, older than I am now, and they came to the funeral of my brother 30 years after they had gone to college to share with us how much Mark had meant to them. I was shocked. When I was little, I didn't imagine that Mark was having an impact on anybody, let alone everyone he met. I have always felt pretty lucky in my life. It started with incredible parents, having Mark in my life, and it's carried on in a million different ways. Teaching and helping Mark all those years helped me to see how a life of helping others can wrap me in immense joy. This is not to say that I'm always bounding with joy. I am not, trust me, just ask Art. It also is not to say that while I feel lucky and I choose gratitude, that I have not experienced pain and suffering. I just didn't choose to go down that pathway today. I do not focus on it in my everyday life. However, I am recognizing that as I get older, the things that do bring me joy are helping others and then remembering to be grateful. Gratitude for the big and little moments is everything. I am grateful this morning for Bobby for asking me to do this, which has reminded me of my childhood, for this new way of doing chapel, which makes it possible for my daughters to be watching from Wesleyan, Cape Cod, and Olympia, Washington, my mom who's watching from Florida, and my sisters too in Colorado, Maryland, and Massachusetts. I'm grateful to my dad who always saw the bright side of life, and for my mom who did and does things for others constantly. I'm grateful for my kind and gentle husband and for my wonderful children. More and more in my life, I see that when I am down, gratitude for and connection with others is what pulls me out. It's just a matter of remembering to look for and see the beauty in these moments. Thank you.